What's up, y'all? My name is IR Trap God, and this is a breakdown of the map Asilo on Modern Warfare 2. Before we get into the video, I just want to mention that this one's going to be a little bit different from the breakdowns that I've done in the past. When it comes to strategy, I usually focus on hardpoint and talk mostly about the rotations, but Asilo doesn't have hardpoint ranked, so I took this opportunity to dive deeper into strategy for Control and S&D. I spent a ton of time watching VODs from the CDL and trying out strategies in my own ranked games to make sure that I'm giving y'all the best advice possible. So if y'all enjoy the content, make sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have feedback, as always, feel free to leave a comment. I read almost all of them and respond to most of them as well. With that, let's jump into the breakdown. First, we'll go through the callouts around the map. Starting at the A site on Control, it sits here in this open space called Courtyard, or I typically just call it A Control. Along this wall of the point, there are a few arches. This one is mid-arch, and then you can identify the other two by saying something like our arch and their arch, and people usually know what you're talking about. Next to the point, you have the side hill, and that leads up to this vantage point, which can be called Red Tower, or I've sometimes heard people call it Radio. On the other side of the point, as we go into this big building in the middle, the side towards the defensive spawn is called Gym, and then across from it is Checkers, because the floor in here is this checkered pattern. Upstairs above the point, this area is called Balcony. Towards the defensive side, this room is Kitchen, and then towards the offensive side, this room is called Money. As you come out of Money, this area is called Top Green. This window up here is a strong vantage point for both game modes, so if someone is up here, you can call it Top Mid or Top Window. Either one typically works, and it's kind of the same thing on the other side of Top Mid as well. Back down on the ground floor, this room here is where the Search and Destroy A-bomb is located. Outside of it, this area is called Kegs because of the big kegs here next to the door. Towards the offensive spawn, this room is called Pool, and over here in the corner, you have Bar. Then back towards the defensive spawn, past Gym, this room is called Lockers. There's also this little room along the side of the building that can be called Tools, Closet, or Secret. I think Tools is probably what I hear most often. Going outside here, this area is the B point for Control. Around it, you have Trucks, and then this little spot here is called Box Heady. This walkway along the main building is called Alley. On the other side of the wall, this open grassy area is called Field. And then towards the offensive spawn, this building is referred to as White. Towards the defensive side, the B-bomb for Search and Destroy sits in the first floor of this building here. On top of this building, there's an AC unit that's super common for people to use as cover. So that roof up there is called Top AC. Up here outside of Top Mid, where all these tables are, this is commonly called Party. And then finally, this big long hill in the spawn is just called Back Hill. Let's talk strategy for playing Control on Asilo. There isn't a particular point that's easier to capture or defend than the other, although typically A gets captured first, and then B is the final point of defense. If you're trying to decide between holding one or the other, it seems like the B point is more of an all or nothing situation where it's hard for them to get in, but once they do, it's hard to get them off. Whereas the A point is a lot messier and there's a lot more room for error on both sides without either side losing full. Starting with the defensive side, when you're an AR player over on A, you have a couple of options. At least one AR player should be focused on getting control of the red tower. If you can manage to do so, it's really difficult for the offense to push you, but you get a ton of angles on the point itself. So a lot of times they're going to be forced to kill you if they want to capture the point. If you're not focused on red tower, my suggestion would be to just play directly around the point. Those outer walls are good to watch so that your SMG players don't get short flanked. And on the point itself, it's honestly not bad to just sit in a corner and watch one of the entrances. If you're further up, you can sit at these boxes and have a crazy head glitch towards the offense's spawn. Or if you're further back, you can play on this top railing to cover that same kind of entrance to the point. As a sub player, you want to be much more focused on this mid building. Up above the point, if you can take control of Balcony, then you can get your eyes on those outer corners that someone at Red Tower wouldn't be able to see. Or if you get the sense that maybe they're trying to make a surprise push for B, then you can sneak through Money and get an angle on them from Top Mid. The other option is to play down on this first floor, either in checkers, preventing them from getting on the point in the first place, or if you're pushed further back, you can play through that gym area. One nice thing about playing down here is that if you don't have control of that red tower, if there's someone in one of those outer corners, you can actually use the door for cover because they can't shoot through it. If you do have control of red tower, you can also just run through the front and play around these boxes for cover. On offense, it's a pretty similar deal. If you're an AR player, you either want to play for the red tower or you want to be playing one of those longer angles on the point. In general, I would say you don't ever want to go to the point up against this outer edge of the mid building unless you have a lot of control over that area, because there's just a ton of angles you can get shot from and not really a single bit of cover. SMG players, again, you want to be playing from inside this mid building, either up top clearing out defenders or down below trying to touch the point. If you can manage to do so, a great aggressive move on this point is to get up to these boxes closer to the defense's spawn. That's going to put you in a really good position to shut down anyone trying to get onto the point, and especially catching AR players here, you're going to have a huge advantage in this tight space. Just be aware when you're here that they can come from above you, either from the balcony or just by jumping over that wall. When you're actually capturing the point, again, these doors are really handy since you can't shoot through them. You can even use them as a head glitch like this, which makes it really difficult for someone to land shots on you. Switching gears over to B, this is a much more AR-dominated point. As a defensive AR player, if your team has a lot of map control, it's good to push up and use these boxes and field as cover, or if you're really feeling bold, you can try to get up to their top mid window. Either one of these spots is going to make it virtually impossible for the offense to get up to the point. As you get pushed back, you can use any one of these cheeky head glitches along field to defend, or just hang out in the alley, pre-aiming their spawn and keeping an eye out for flanks through kegs. When you're at DEFCON 5 and the offense is knocking on your door, your best vantage points are going to be this area behind trucks, up at top AC, or up at top mid, either from window or from party. There's a ton of cover around this point, so when you're on defense, it's extremely important that your team plays it from multiple angles. Otherwise, the offense can use that cover to get free time and potentially force you to challenge them, which puts you at a huge disadvantage. The best setups that I've seen involve one player behind those trucks and another player watching from somewhere over by mid. As a defensive SMG player, you can't do quite as much on this point. If your team has a lot of map control, you can play inside the mid building so you can block flank routes and force the offense to charge straight through field. You can also set yourself up behind the walls next to field so that if anyone gets up closer to the point, you can be there to challenge it. As the offense gains ground though and gets up towards the point, you really just want to attack their tools or use the S&DB building to get up against the fence and then jump out from there. I know it might seem like an easy choice, but you want to avoid just running at the point through this path up against mid. That's always going to be the first spot that the offense pre-aims once they get onto the point. With an SMG, you're almost guaranteed to get beamed. I would honestly say even AR players should probably avoid that route in most situations. When you're on offense going for B, it's all about having freedom of movement through field and being able to get up to the point. As you start from the back, you're going to want to make sure you have full control of top mid, the white building, and those little boxes in the middle of field. Then as an AR player, you can use those three spots to get angles on most of the different vantage points the defense will be trying to cover the point from. There's also this pretty nice head glitch in the alley that allows you to cover tools and some of the top party area. When you're up on the point with an AR, your best bet is to play over at trucks, just trying to pre-aim the different entrances from mid-building and kind of keeping an eye on the flank around the S&DB building. You can also use this gnarly box heady to capture the point and still have some cover, though you're more vulnerable to attacks from tools here and it can be difficult to shoot through that fence with an AR. As an SMG player attacking B, you should either play through the mid-building to try to clear out some of those defensive vantage points, or if your team has control of field, then you can get up to the point and play around those trucks and walls. As you get up onto the point, you can use those same boxes I mentioned for the AR players, or get up against the fence to catch them off guard as they jump onto the point to contest. Whether you're offense or defense, if you're running an SMG and find yourself struggling around this B point, sometimes it's just worth it to make the switch to the AR. That additional range can be the difference between getting a game-saving pick and marching to your death with the clock running down. Let's talk a bit about the spawns for this map. When you're playing defense, I would recommend not worrying too much about which side the offense is spawning on. Just focus on getting them pinned down into a single area and restrict their movement throughout the rest of the map. Here we have a clip from Major 3 where Nero puts on an absolute clinic for how to play defense on this map. He gets some crazy kills off the start and is able to break through mid, But instead of pressing further up and chasing kills or trying to force a spawn change, he just sits back and lets them respawn in that same spot. So now he can effectively act as a barrier in this mid building. LAG knows he's there somewhere, but they don't know where, so they end up doing exactly what he wanted them to do. They send Arcitys all alone to try to deal with him, while the rest of the team just pushes on towards B, where the rest of the breach guys are waiting. The ARs posted up to defend have no problem shutting it down. After LAG spawns up, they decide to try a push towards A, but because of Nero's position, he can easily read it and do pretty much the exact same thing with just some small adjustments. He gets a couple of kills, and then his teammates further back are able to make the short rotation over to the point and clean things up. This is some beautiful work by Nero. As an SMG on this map, no matter what game mode it is, your goal is to do exactly what he's doing here. Control as much space in that mid lane as possible so that the other team can't move between the lanes freely and they're forced to fight the rest of your team head on. Now, if you're the offense and you're on the other side of the situation, there are a couple of different ways to deal with it, but you have to be intentional about it. The mistake LAG made in this series was sending a single person into that rat's nest. That person is going to be at such a disadvantage because the other player is just going to be sitting there waiting either for an attack or just trying to catch someone on the flank. In this example, it is made even worse by the fact that Arcitys is an AR going against Nero with a sub in a tight space. Your best option is probably going to be sending multiple players to go deal with the problem. That way, even if one person dies, you can still trade it out and you reclaim that space at the cost of a single life. There were plenty of times throughout that fight where if there had been a teammate with Arcitys, they would have easily been able to take Nero down, but since it was one-on-one, Arcitys dies and LAG ends up back at square one. The other option is to just ignore the person for a bit. If all 4 players had gone to B, Nero would be left with 2 options. He could stay in mid and leave his team in a 3v4, or he could try a flank. So as long as you're watching that flank route, you're guaranteed at worst a 4-on-4 fight, and at best a free kill before you actually get up to the point to fight. When you're over on offense, this is where it's really helpful to get the other team spawning out, because every second your team can spend stacked on a point is absolutely critical. For example, if you're on B, what you don't want is the defense spawning right there at the back hill, because they're going to be able to get to the point from any angle very quickly. You want them spawning further away, so what you have to do is get someone pushed up into this building that has the B-bomb on S&D. That's close enough to that back hill that it'll stop them from spawning back there, and instead they're going to spawn further towards that back building. Over on A, you want the opposite. So to get them spawning over at the back hill, you want to either get pushed up all the way on the point to this wall, or you want to get out onto party and play this left corner so that you can watch them as they come out of their spawn. So now let's look at some strategy for search and destroy. This map is pretty much just 3 lanes, one up here through field, one down here through side hill, and then one straight through mid. So S&D strategy is all about how you play through those areas. When you're on defense, there are a couple things you need to do every single round. First, you need to have at least one player run far enough through mid right off of spawn to get eyes on that A bomb room. This is the go-to bomb site for the offense, and running from spawn, each team will get there at a pretty similar time, so if you don't run straight there, you're going to lose valuable space. Not only is that room super hard to clear if you let them get in there, but from the defensive side, you have to run straight through mid to get to the door, so if you wait till everyone's set up, then you're going to be running through a death trap. The second thing you need to do on defense is have an AR player covering one of the outer lanes, either that field lane or the side hill. This is less about claiming space and more about getting information. You're already going to have people mid, so you have 2 out of the 3 lanes covered, but then even if the offense takes that 3rd lane that you're not covering, you're going to be able to read that once you realize they're not in the lanes you are covering. This is a nice little example of how high-level Call of Duty players draw conclusions about the other team's movements. What you see is important, but sometimes the more important insights actually come from what you don't see. Bits of information in a Call of Duty match are just like little pieces of a larger puzzle. So there's always lots of pieces you're not seeing, and the game is all about making educated guesses on what's happening in those areas that you don't see. Back to the map, as an SMG player on defense, the most common thing to do by far is just run to that A bomb room off spawn. Once you're in there, you can basically just pick a corner at random and pre-aim the door or window. Doing that is going to make it an absolute nightmare for the offense to get in there and try to kill you before you kill them. The other thing you can do if you want to mix things up is go for a short flank either around the alley next to field or through that A control courtyard. That can be nice to do every couple rounds just to keep them on their toes. For AR players, I mentioned that someone should cover one of those outer lanes. When you're doing that, if you get the vibe that there's no one coming to your lane, you can kind of work your way back to an angle into that mid building. For example, if you're on the field side, you can try to get an angle on the offense side's top mid window, Or if you're on the hillside, you can bust open those doors to checkers with a stun grenade and try to get an angle on them through there. If you're not the one playing an outer lane, then top mid is pretty much where you want to be as an AR player. The goal of being up here is to prevent the offense from moving freely around the bomb room, so you want to have eyes on bottom mid, but you also need to be aware of the other side's top mid because they're probably going to have someone else doing the same thing. You also want to keep an eye on those flanks around balcony and field and be ready to help your friend out that's on the outer lane if need be. When you're on offense, you obviously have a lot more control over how the round plays out. Like I mentioned before, the A-bomb is the go-to spot to plant because of how close it is to the spawn and how easy that room is to defend. But before you get to that point, you have to actually get into the room. You can try busting in there and hoping your gunny is enough, but that's probably going to have a very low rate of success. The way to get into this room is to play it slowly and carefully. Use that side window or open up the door to get a look around at some of the corners and start to narrow down where those defenders are sitting. Try throwing some stuns in there, some grenades, see if you can get them to move or just get a hit marker to get some information. Going back to an earlier point, this is why mid control is super important for both teams. The number of different angles you're going to have at your disposal to peek into that bomb room is going to be a direct result of how much control your team has of that open mid corridor. So for you AR players out there, one of you should always be sitting top mid or down at the pool tables, keeping an eye on things and trying to hold space for your SMG players to go to work on that bomb room. For the times when you're running an AR, but you've already got someone doing that job, you've really got a lot of creative freedom. You definitely want to stay close to your team, so don't go off on some crazy long flank, but you can pretty much play from anywhere around that mid building. If you need some guidance, I would say just play along your teammates, try to cover them from unexpected angles, or be there for the trade if they get picked off. If a particular flank has been a problem throughout the match, maybe you can try providing some extra defense on that side of the building. Or if you want to get aggressive, you can go for a short flank yourself. Also, if you didn't know, you can shoot through this entire wall on A. So if you're playing against a team and you find they're going to very particular spots in that room pretty much every round, you can try just wallbang them into oblivion. 2Real did this in Major 3 qualifiers and freaked everyone out when he beamed not one, but 2 members of LAG right through the wall just because he knew the popular spots and how to line them up. So if you have the opportunity, you can give it a shot. Once you get the bomb down on A, it basically becomes the same as playing defense, where you just pick a corner and try to read what direction they're going to be coming from. It can also be nice to plant this outer side of the bomb so that if someone from your team can get up to top mid, you can check it from there. The other option for the defense is, of course, to make a hit over at the B bomb site. I'll say typically the reason a team plants over here is because the A push failed and they want to take another shot at setting up a push, but sometimes you might also just want to mix things up. If you do go for B off spawn, it is super important that you have AR players hanging a bit further back to watch those popular spots like top AC and top party. You also want to be careful when you're working your way through that B control area because there's a ton of little spots around those trucks, boxes, and fences that the defense can hide in. Once you get the bomb planted, if you're an SMG player, you can either stay inside that building and just sit in a corner, or if you're feeling crazy, sneak out to that B control area and play around the cover to get information and maybe catch someone off guard. Definitely don't ever go towards that back hill area as an SMG player, because if you do that, you're almost guaranteed to get into a long-range fight. As an AR player, you can go almost anywhere, although I wouldn't recommend staying in the bomb room. Probably one of the better spots is hiding behind this truck right in front of the bomb building, and then you can peek underneath it to see when they're pushing you or going for a defuse. You can also go towards back hill, but I personally find it a bit awkward because they can get above you and there's not really a ton of cover when you actually check the bomb. That's it for strategy, so let's go through the map and look at some different tips and tricks that can be useful in any game mode. First, there are a ton of different ways you can get up to the second floor of this main building without using the stairs. Over on the defensive side, you can jump onto this little wall and mantle onto the railing, which is nice when you're coming off spawn and you want to head up to top mid. Next to the A-bomb room, you can also climb onto kegs and jump up at mantle onto this little ledge here. Around field, there are a bunch of different things you can climb on, but one of the easier ways is to just climb up these boxes and onto this roof to get into top mid. Around tools, you can climb onto these boxes and get up to the tin roof here. Or you can even climb up from alley without using the ladder by just hopping onto the flower pot and then mantling above the door. With all these walls over here, the possibilities are pretty much endless. You can climb up at the trucks, at the boxes and field, you can jump from tin roof or top AC, or you can even just mantle onto any of the walls directly, and then from there you can run anywhere your heart desires. On the other side of the map, at the A control site, there's these boxes you can climb onto and mantle onto the balcony here. If you're wanting to go to that balcony off spawn on defense, that is probably the quickest way to do it. You can also get onto any of the walls here, though the only place you can really go to is this railing back here at the stairs leading up to party. This railing is actually a nice spot to sit though, because you can get a peek over this wall all the way down to where the offense would be coming out of their spawn. Another kind of cool spot on these stairs, you can climb up onto the railing and then go up against this fence. That way you can watch the party area without really being exposed at all. Just be aware that they can shoot through that fence once they realize that you're there. If you're playing around the red tower over here and you're getting pushed from the offense side, obviously there's a bunch of cover up here, but if you want to mix it up a little bit, you can also jump onto this concrete block in the back. It makes it a little harder for them to see you, and it makes it kind of awkward for them to shoot you because the steel beams will actually block some of the bullets. Back on the other side towards field, there's a bunch of different head glitches around this B control area that are great to defend from, like this spot next to alley, or this spot on the boxes up against the edge of the map. If you're approaching this B-bomb from the other direction and you think someone is hiding somewhere around this back corner, you can actually get up on the trucks and jump outside of the map for a second and then just jump down to surprise them. Inside this B-bomb building, you can do a running jump onto this toolbox, and then you can get up onto this dolly here and use these boxes for cover, which is handy if you're trying to protect the bomb. This last spot, I'll admit, is kind of nerdy, but sometimes it can come in handy. Over in pool, you can just jump up next to these arcade games and get tucked in there to wait for people passing through. Lastly, just talking a little bit about nade spots. I'll be honest here, there isn't much interesting you can do on this map. You can obviously toss your nade down one of these side lanes and find some occasional success, or maybe at least get some information. Definitely the most popular grenade play I see is to throw a stun off the defense's spawn, through bottom mid and into that pool area over towards the offense's spawn. That ends up hitting people like 9 out of 10 times, so it can really slow down their initial push, and if for some reason you don't get any hits down there, it can definitely help you sniff out a flank or a push towards B. That's it for the breakdown of Asilo. Remember to drop a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel so that you can watch my future videos as soon as they come out, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Until next time, good luck out there.